Testing. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Agenda Briefing Forum. This evening is not a decision-making forum, it is the briefing on the agenda for the Ordinary Council meeting, which will be held next Tuesday, the 23rd of May 2023. I'd like to remind everyone in chambers to ensure that comments are respectful to the Council and all meeting attendees, including city officers and those in the gallery. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This evening there are no announcements. I'll move on to attendance. Councillor Bull has provided an apology for this evening's meeting. Councillor Clark will be attending via electronic means, and all other councillors are present in the chamber this evening. I'd also like to welcome the Honourable Dave Kelly, Member for Bassendean, to the chamber. Move on to item 5, disclosures of interest. Are there any councillors who have an interest to disclose? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10.3.3, the local bike plan. That's
Apologies, Mayor. I can't hear anything from you guys. I just want to check.
Can you hear me, Councillor Clark? Councillor Clark?
Sorry, I can hear now. I couldn't hear anything before though. Yep.
Okay, so you can hear me now?
And yes.
Okay, we're just moving on to declarations of interest, and the Deputy Mayor is beginning.
Thank you.
Item 10.3.3, the local bike plan. It's a proximity interest. I live on Railway Parade, which is scheduled for future works or proposed future works. And item 10.3.1, safe routes to school. It's an indirect financial interest. My husband owns property on Caledonian Avenue, which is proposed works in the implementation plan.
Sorry, what type of interest was that? Indirect financial, yep. Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a number of interests to declare. The financial reports, so 10.2.1. I'm a member of the Bayswater Bowls Club, so that's an impartial interest. I'll remain in the room. My husband's grandparents live in one of the city's aged care facilities. That's also an impartial interest. I'll remain in the room. And my son attends Bayswater Wave swimming classes. That's an impartial interest. I'll remain in the room. Bayswater Bowls Club comes up again in 10.2.3.1. So that's an impartial interest, and I'll remain in the room. 10.1.1, the CAT Amendment Local Law. I've received representations from Dave Kelly, MLA, and Rachel Roberts. That's an impartial interest, and I'll remain in the room. 10.3.2, the Drake Street bike path design. I'm going to declare a proximity interest for that and leave the room. The way that Coode Street is dealt with that means that that would affect the property that I reside in on page 113. And the other two was 10.6.1.2. Sorry, I think the numbering in the top of the agenda is slightly different to the numbering in the actual contents page. So 10.6.1.1, I believe, I'll have to cross-reference that number, where it refers to the Minister for Local Government, John Carey. That's an impartial interest.
Can I just confirm, sorry, Councillor Clark, can I just confirm the title of that item, seeing as you're concerned about the numbering?
So I'd have to cross-reference it, and I can't quite do that properly with the papers, but there's one item which I believe is the annual report and financial reports.
Okay, that's 10.6.1.1.
Well, it's the one that refers directly to the Minister for Local Government. So perhaps it is the OAG one. I'll have to double check that. So that's an impartial interest, and I'll remain in the room. And 10.6.1.9, update on the local government reform. Also an impartial interest in relation to Minister John Carey, and I'll remain in the room.
Thank you. Councillor Osazowski?
Thank you. Mine is for item 10.3.3, the draft local bike plan. I live on Ivanhoe Street, and I believe there are some works considered for that street. It's a proximity, and I'll leave the room.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson-Pick.
Item 10.3.1, Safe Routes to School Plan. It's an impartial interest. My kids attend the Maylands Peninsula Primary School, and I'm also a member of the school's board.
And you'll be staying in the room?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to declare one as well. Sorry, just one moment. I'd like to declare on item 10.4.1 an impartial interest. The directors of the applicant are known to me. It's an impartial interest and I'll be staying in the room. Okay, so councillors, thank you for that. We'll now move on to deputations, and this evening we have 6 in-person deputations, and I'll explain how the process will work. Each person who is presenting a deputation will be invited to come forward and speak at the microphone for up to 5 minutes. As we get close to 5 minutes, I'll let you know so that you can conclude your deputation. And given the amount of deputations we have, I'd appreciate if everyone would stay within their time limits, please. Once you have finished, councillors may have some questions for you. So I will invite the first deputy up, which is in relation to item 10.1.1, Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2023. Mr. David Dyke is in attendance and speaking in opposition to the officer's recommendation, if you'd like to come forward.
David, pardon me, David Dyke, View Street in Maylands. I'd like to thank everyone in this continuing process for your time, effort and discussions to find the best solution for the City of Bayswater community. I feel puzzled and disappointed council staff have not provided all relevant information to councillors for them to make the best decision with all known facts presented. It's my assessment the council advice is weak because the threat in advice received from Legal Advisory Officer of the JSCDL about not complying with their direction to take out clause 2.2 is serious. The JSCDL Legal Advisory Officer then says any failure to comply with an undertaking may be reported to the Legislative Council for further action. The City then quotes Council therefore does not have any further discretion on this matter. I wonder, why not? A quick phone call by myself to the Legislative Council Committee Office of Western Australia could not give me any reference to what action would be taken other than that it would be reported to the Legislative Council. Maybe that's really what we want. It'd certainly bring it out. There is no penalty, it appears to me, as this is scaremongering at its best. You can't get it any better. I provided some legal advice to council staff on the 5th of May, and there is no mention of this in the council's summary and recommendations. The legal advice is sound and makes it clear that the clause 2.2, cats in other places of the Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2022 is not in contravention of the WA Cat Act 2011. There are other options to councillors, such as delaying their decision, and there is no mention of this in council summary and recommendations. I therefore recommend to not comply with the JSCDL recommendations to delete clause 2.2. Be stronger in pushing back to the JSCDL, questioning their recommendations and asking why What basis and legal advice are they committee acting on? The JSCDL are inconsistent in their decisions, such as the one example, the Northern Cat Act. They approved that. What stopped them approving ours? Since my motion at the AGM 2021, with the many submissions, discussions in community, Facebook comments, etc., it is clear our community want protection of wildlife to keep biodiversity, healthy ecosystems, and also safety of cats. Overwhelmingly, our community are asking for cat containment. We're nearly there, 42 definite sites and one that's been put forward of this process needs your strong conviction to put back the clause 2.2 and push back with questioning the JSCDL on reasons for their decision. I'd like to present the duality of this situation. It's bizarre. Here you are on this side treading on eggshells around the JSCDL, pussyfooting around. Sorry for the pun there, it wasn't really meant. Over this side, I see the city of Bayswater has embraced Transition Town Bayswater, and they mention it's new, it's New Year 2029. Damon Gamur regenerating, regenerating Australia. Absolutely beautiful that the council has embraced this.
Mr Dyke, you've reached 5 minutes.
Can I have 1.5 minutes more?
We do have a lot to get through. I will put it to the vote. Would someone like to extend it by 1.5 minutes? Moved by Councillor Palmer, seconded. Councillor Peterson-Pick, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Maleka, Councillor Ostaszewski, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Peterson-Pick, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Clark and myself. That's
Thank you.
carried.
Thank you all.
Just please.
I'll shorten it down very quickly. On the way here, I actually thought of all your children, the children in the audience here, my kids, my grandkids. I would hate to see my grandson Hamish say in 20 years' time, I wish my pop had done better than what he did. It's tragic that it's being left over here with mucking around. I'd like you to emphasise this strongly to the JSCDL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if councillors have any questions. Councillor Peterson-Pick.
Thank you, David. Just one question. You mentioned something that you understand that we were told that there was no discretion for council to make a decision on the issue. Is this what you said? This is what you understand, that we did not have discretion?
Sorry, I'm not
So
sure.
I heard that you said that your understanding was that council did not have discretion with regards to clause 2.2, the discretion to decide what to do.
Yeah, I'll read it. The city then quotes, council therefore does not have any further discretion on this matter.
Is this from the current report?
Uh,
From the current report for the
yeah,
current? Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? No, thank you very much, Mr Dyke. I'll now move to our second deputation, which is in relation to the same item, 10.1.1, Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2023. The Honourable Dave Kelly will be in attendance, speaking in opposition to the officer's recommendation.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make the deputation. As you know, I'm the MP for Bassendean, which my electorate includes areas of Bayswater, Bassendean and the City of Swan. You'll be surprised to know that I don't often make deputations to local government. I sort of have a bit of a policy that I'm not going to interfere with local government decisions. I think I've only ever given a deputation before to the City of Swan on another local issue. But this issue, which is really the protection of native wildlife, is of such importance that I really felt compelled to come down here and make a deputation. So thank you very much for the opportunity. You have done an amazing job so far in supporting local groups, ratepayers who really want to protect native wildlife. The fact that you went through such an extensive consultation and that you've come up with some draft cat laws that really would provide significant protection for local wildlife is just fantastic. The response you got from your ratepayers, my constituents, very significantly in favour of protective native wildlife. We give a lot of love to ratepayers who go out there, they weed, they replant, they do all that sort of stuff to protect native wildlife and protect and create habitat for native wildlife, that it makes sense that we go this extra mile to really put cats in a situation where they're not killing wildlife every night, which is what currently happens. Now, it's really unfortunate, and this issue's been taken up by the town of Bassendean and the City of Bayswater. Both councils have put forward different proposals. The one that you've put forward mirrors the northern local cat laws, which have been approved by the Parliament. So what you've done is a very sensible approach. It's very unfortunate, in my view, that the Joint Standing Committee has, for some reason, taken a different view to the City of Bayswater's proposal compared to the view they took on the City of Northam without any explanation. So given the amount of feeling that's come from my constituents, your ratepayers, on this issue, and the apparent contradiction, the obvious contradiction with the way the Joint Standing Committee has dealt with this issue, it is appropriate that, in my view, that you push ahead. You've now been provided with independent legal advice from Gregory Castledine, or Castledine Gregory, whatever they call themselves. That legal advice is quite clear that what you're proposing is permissible under the Cat Act. Now, I think, my understanding is that's not information that you previously had before you. You've now, and I understand that's been distributed by community groups to all the councillors. I think it is highly appropriate that you go back to the Joint Standing Committee and say, look, we made the decision to give you the undertaking on the basis of the information that was before us, and that was your advice that the cat laws that we're proposing are outside the Act. We now have legal advice that what the council is proposing is within the lawful under the legislation. So rather than next week making a decision that you've come to the end of the road and you have to comply and take out 2.2, I think one option that you could pursue is pass a resolution that you want to go, you authorise the Mayor to go back to the committee and say, we've got this new advice, we want the committee to reconsider its decision. That is perfectly appropriate. As you know, the Joint Standing Committee, when they get these laws from local councils, there is to and fro. It's not just a case of they make a decision and that's it. I think it would be highly appropriate, and that's what I would recommend you do, go back to the Joint Standing Committee and say, we've got some new legal advice, this is what it is, we want you to reconsider your decision, and then wait and see what advice you get. Now, I think that is a very cautious, a very responsible process for you to follow, which is basically what you've done to date. So I do think there is a way to go. You've done an amazing job to date. You've supported the wetland groups, the environment groups in the, I think I'm getting the wind up from the Mayor. So I just don't want you to think that next week you've got a binary choice. You either fold, if you like, or you put up the barricades. I think you've got a third option, which is to provide this new advice to the Joint Standing Committee and go back to them and ask them to reconsider. So thank you very much. I'm not sure that State Parliament would work that well if you had public deputations, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you
Thank you very much. I'll just, before you take a seat, I'll just ask if councillors have any questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just wondering when the state government will be reviewing the CAT Act.
Look, that, I'd love to be able to tell you that. That's a matter for John Carey, who's the minister responsible. And I know you're probably asking that because it'd be just fantastic if the CAT Act could be reviewed and more clearer provisions be put there. That may or may not ever happen. That's the way the parliamentary process works. So you've got a CAT Act, which you've got credible legal advice from a West Perth law firm who basically say what you're proposing is legal. You've got a whole bunch of your ratepayers who want you to do this. You've got an opportunity to go the extra mile, and I would just encourage you to do it rather than wait for a review of the CAT Act, which may never come. And in the meantime, a whole bunch of wildlife is getting destroyed and a whole bunch of people here working their backsides off who are going to be disappointed. So, you have to deal with the legislation you've got, I suppose.
Councillor Peterson-Pick.
Yes, thank you for coming here tonight. So the officers are telling us that the council does not have any discretion on this matter. It was mentioned before, and it is in the report. So from your knowledge as a member of parliament, do local government actually have discretion?
Yeah, at this point, you haven't reached the end of the road. You've given an undertaking that within 6 months you'll do some certain things, and in the meantime, you won't enforce the new provisions. You're still within that 6 months. You could write back to the chair of the committee, say, look, there's new information. We want you to reconsider it. In the meantime, we're still not enforcing the new provisions. So there's no harm being done out there in cat land, if you like. If the committee comes back to you and wants to have more discussion, you can do that. There is no process whereby that committee can do something harmful to the City of Bayswater. There is no option. In their annual report, they could say, the City of Bayswater took their time in abiding by their undertaking or whatever, but frankly, if they said that, so what? There is nothing that they can do at this point in time. You're still within your 6 months. If this matter takes 7 months to resolve, presumably you're not going to be implementing the new provisions anyway, so there's no harm being done. The only harm that's going to be done is if council backs down, if you like. All these people here will be disappointed. Wildlife will be destroyed. When will you get the chance to look at this issue again? Probably not for years to come. Now is the time.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much for your deputy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, I believe, has a question. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a question, just I suppose in terms of the process and procedure. I suppose is part of this going back to the suggestion is that the council could go back to the state government committee, essentially asking them to remake a decision more along the Northern Shire lines than what they've done, or revoke a decision. I just wanted to get a sense of whether you had any idea whether they did that or what the process might be around that.
Well, my understanding is with all these local laws, once they get passed, they get forwarded off to that committee. The committee then, and the committee officers will tic-tac with the local councils, and that happens before the Joint Standing Committee then makes a decision, which is what they've done. I'm not aware that there is anything that would prevent that committee reconsidering its decision based on new information. I'm not aware that there is anything that would stop the committee from doing that. Now, if you write back to the committee and say, we've got new information, we want you to reconsider it, they may come back and say, for X, Y and Z reason, we can't reconsider it. I'm not aware of anything that stops them from doing that. And I suppose you won't know, Councillor Clark, unless you ask. And so that's what I'm suggesting you do.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much for your
You're welcome.
deputation.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the third deputation, which is in relation to the same item, 10.1.1, Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2023. Rachel Roberts is in attendance, speaking in opposition to the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Rachel Roberts, 26B Armada Street, Bayswater. I won't be long because I think a lot has already been said. The only thing I would emphasise is that we have come so far and we don't know how long it will be till we get this close again. It's quite incredible in the sense that the whole community and council have managed to reach this goal that we've been probably in Australia hoping for 200 years, and that is we protect some of the species that are very close to extinction. With climate change, we don't have a lot of time to look after the species, to know what they are, to protect them the best way we can, and a lot of the time we don't have a lot of protections. So removing one of the predators from the environment and keeping them safe at home, which is in fact where they are more safe, is what we need to do as a community. We just need to find the mechanism to get there. So what I would really hope is that when you make a decision on this, that you write back to the Joint Standing Committee, that you say there is already precedent in 2 councils who have already passed exactly this wording, and there is now also legal advice from a very reputable legal firm in council law, and that legal advice says, in our opinion, the effective control provision is valid. And I think what you need to understand is that the previous legal advice has been around the word nuisance, and that is a common law term that is, unfortunately, has a long history behind it, that term. Even though we consider cats to be nuisances, it's legally got a lot behind it. Whereas the wording we have used has, as far as we know, not been considered separately to that and not had legal advice attached to it. So I really would ask that you write back to the Joint Standing Committee, say there is precedence already, there is now this legal advice to support the wording in clause 2.2, and could we please have an extension of time for them to reconsider based on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if there are any questions from councillors. No, thank you. We'll move on to the next one, which is in relation to the same item, 10.1.1, Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2023. Jeff Trott is in attendance, speaking in opposition to the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. There's a couple of hard acts to follow this. I'll do my best. Friends of Martinez commends and thanks the councillors firstly for consulting extensively with the local community when considering changes to the Keeping and Control of Cats local law, and secondly for taking into account community feedback in framing the amended law. It's noteworthy that of the 500 or so submissions received by the city, 70% supported the clause 2.2 cats in other places incorporated in the revised law council resolved to adopt at the ordinary council meeting in August last year. I understand the JSCDL has unfortunately now requested that clause 2.2 cats in other places be removed. We consider this to be the key clause in the City of Bayswater's new cat law. It was unanimously advocated for by the city's Friends of groups, and as mentioned earlier, strongly supported by the wider local community. Draconian legislation deems it unlawful for the City of Bayswater to divulge the reasons given by the JSDCL for its request. And it beggars belief that the state government elected by the people of WA decrees that local governments elected by the people of the LGA cannot divulge reasons for decisions it imposes on those local governments regarding their local laws to those same people, the electors.
Mr. Trott, do you mind just speaking a bit more into the microphone? Thank you.
This absence of transparency facilitates inconsistency and lack of accountability in the JSDCL's rulings, as it would appear to be the case with the cat local law in WA. For example, despite the shroud of secrecy around reasons for the JSDCL's rulings, I note from the City of Bayswater's council minutes of 26 April 22 that the JSCDL's rationale for requesting the removal of cats in other places clause from the Town of Bassendean's cat local law was that it may result in forcing owners to confine their cats which could be considered inconsistent with and not authorised by the Cat Act. Yet, as councillors are aware, I'm sure, the City of Northam's cat local law, clause 3.2, cats in other places, mirrors that. The burning question is why the JSCDL considers this clause could be considered inconsistent with and not authorised by the Cat Act in Bayswater, Victoria Park, Fremantle and other local government areas including Bassendean, but not in Northam, less than 100 kilometres away. Equally inconsistent is the JSCDL's concession to allow prohibited areas clauses, which, if the basis of the JSCDL's request is legally sound, could also be considered inconsistent with and not authorised by the WA Cat Act 2011, as it may also force owners in those prohibited areas to confine their cats. The WA Cat Act won't be reviewed until after 2024. We don't know when, but it won't be before then. And until it is, current evidence tells us, that each roaming domestic cat in WA will kill on average 110 native animals. That is 40 reptiles, 38 birds and 30 mammals per year. That's each cat. The JSCDL's response to the town of Bassendean states that cats in other places may result in forcing owners to confine their cats, which could be considered inconsistent with and not authorised by the Cat Act 2011. Sorry, I need to go back. I've put my pages in the wrong order. So going back, furthermore, what rationale does the JSCDL offer for the number of areas within a local government municipality it will approve or not approve as prohibited areas? It's farcical that cat local law can require owners in some parts, but not the entirety of a local government area, to confine their cats if that law could be considered in those prohibited areas inconsistent with and not authorised by the current WA Cat Act. In the 12 years since the WA Cat Act was last revised, the domestic cat population has surged, as has the number of free-roaming domestic and feral cats. Unsurprisingly, the decimation of the native wildlife has also soared. It's currently estimated that cats in Australia eat about 2 billion reptiles, birds, frogs and mammals each year, and over 1 billion invertebrates.
Mr. Trott, you've reached 5 minutes. If you could please conclude.
Okay, we'll jump to the end. We respectfully urge Council to weigh up independent written legal advice, which I understand has only just been sought, as to whether the clause 2.2, cats in other places, could be considered inconsistent with and not authorised by the Cat Act 2011. If the advice received is consistent with that received by the community, that is, that Council doesn't proceed with the proposed new local law, and it advises the JSCDL accordingly.
Thank you. I'll just ask councillors if they have any questions. No, thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the next deputation, which is in relation to item 10.3.1. Paul Andrich is in attendance, speaking in support of the officer's recommendation. It's Safe Routes to School Implementation Plan.
Sorry, Madam Mayor,
And you're
I've
going
got
to
the
be...
indirect financial on that one. I'll leave for this item.
Leave the room. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, good evening, councillors. As mentioned, my name is Paul Andrich and I'm the principal of Maylands Peninsula Primary School. On behalf of our school community, I'd like to speak in support of the officer's recommendation in respect to the Safe Routes to School and Implementation Plan. As a school community, we have been involved with this initiative since the proposal was first adopted in August 2019. As the key stakeholder, we've been integral in providing feedback and direction to the city over the subsequent 3 years in order to develop an integrated plan that would not only encourage our students and their families to actively travel to school, which is walk, scoot, ride or skate, but to do so in a way that is safe. I'd like to sort of provide a little bit of context about why we're here and where we're at. In 2023, we have 732 students at our school community. It's the largest that our school has ever been, which makes us one of the largest primary schools in inner city Perth. I think we're only just behind Highgate Primary School in terms of total student numbers, and the problems around Highgate are well known. But we're also the largest primary school within the City of Bayswater jurisdiction. As most of you would know, the Maylands area is a destination suburb for many families migrating to Australia from overseas, coming into Perth, due to the range of relatively low-cost housing options in the flats and unit complexes within Maylands. With open borders, it's anticipated that this demand for places at Maylands Peninsula will continue throughout 2023 and well into 2024. These families that live in the high-rise flats and apartments around the school and down along Guildford Road, Peninsula Road along the railway line, live in this high-density area, don't often have access to transport in terms of cars. So many of our families walk or ride or scoot to school, and they traverse long distances to get to and from their homes each day. Many of these students are unaccompanied riders or walkers who might not have the required level of road awareness to get them to and from school safely. In recent years, there's also been a concerted push to get kids out and about and live a less sedentary lifestyle. Our school is part of the Department of Transport Your Move initiative, and we have active travel days each Friday fortnight for our schools, and we have running club which takes place twice a week before school on the Gibney Reserve area. If we're trying to promote the notion of kids getting out of cars and walking or cycling to school each day, together with promoting active and healthy lifestyles which has longer term benefits in terms of physical and also mental health well-being, then providing the requisite infrastructure as part of the City of Bayswater's work to do so is a no-brainer in my view. Concerns about road safety have been raised several times with me in the 11 years that I've been at Maylands Peninsula, at both P&C and at the school board level, and also through the phone calls and emails that I receive at school each day. On average, I would take a couple of calls each term alerting me to the latest near miss up in Caledonia Avenue or around the school's immediate jurisdiction. As such, I'm greatly appreciative of the support that the City of Bayswater has shown to date through engaging with the school and the wider local community to get the implementation plan to this point in time. In early 2023, with the City's support, the crossing point itself closest to the school office on Kelvin Street became a designated wombat crossing. And this has flipped the right-of-way of pedestrians rather than cars and has removed confusion about who has right-of-way. As a consequence of the Safe Routes to School survey, the school has been assisting council officers with building the business case with Main Roads for the provision of signalised pedestrian crossing on Guildford Road somewhere between Derby and Caledonian Avenue. School data indicates that there are close to 100 students represented across 70 families that travel across Guildford Road each day to travel to and from school. I'm hopeful that some positive action will result from this endeavour also. Whilst these actions today are most welcome, we need to jump that final hurdle where the thoughts and views expressed by our community translate into discernible action. As outlined in the officer's recommendation to Council, the learnings to be made by investing fully in the Safe Routes to School program would be of enormous benefit to all schools within the City of Bayswater. In my view and the collective school community, this is the only way in which an accurate measurement of the effectiveness of the Safe Routes to School program can be determined. Adopting only half measures, or some not at all, will not allow the City to gauge the overall effectiveness of the program and the potential benefits it may bring for other school communities. Whilst I understand that there are costs to be incurred as the consequence of endorsing the officer's recommendation, when you weigh these costs up against the potential risk of not taking action to ensure school community safety, it is a relatively small cost in the grand scheme of things. And in my view, and in the view of our school community, would be money well spent. As such, I would strongly encourage each council to look favourably on the school Safe Routes to School plan and support the officer's recommendations in their entirety. Thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you, and that was 5 minutes on the dot. I'll just ask if councillors have any questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I have one. I think you were rushing to get it done in 5 minutes, and I didn't quite catch what you said. How many children or families are crossing Guildford Road, did you say?
100 students represented across 70 families. So we were asked by the City about 2 months ago to sort of get some data as part of in response to the Safe Routes to School initiative. So we have actually quite surprised me about the amount of children that actually do cross Guildford Road each day. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? No, thank you very much. Can we please get the Deputy Mayor back in the room? Okay. Well, I think we'll move on to our next deputation, which is in regards to item 10.4.1, proposed partial demolition of and alterations to two-storey additions to office and factory, and alterations and additions to warehouse at lot 99. 104, 106 Beachborough Road, South Bayswater. We have Peter Merger in attendance speaking in support of the officer's recommendation.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Peter Merger from Urbanistic Town Planning at 231 Buller Street in Perth, and I'm speaking in relation to item 10.4.1 on the Council agenda for 104 Beachborough Road South in Bayswater. So I'm here to speak in support of the officer recommendation for approval, but to ask Council to consider the deletion of two conditions or the modification of two conditions of approval, which are conditions number 4 and 7. Condition 4 refers to a landscaping plan and the need to provide 30 new trees on the site, while condition 7 refers to a cash in lieu provision for public art. I'll speak to both in a moment, but before I speak to those conditions, I wish to provide a brief background on the application. The site is currently operated by Road West Transport, who have used the site since the 1970s for the manufacture of truck associated equipment, including side tippers, end tippers, low loaders, water tankers and tyre carrier trailers, amongst other things. Road West Transport is a major contributor to the local economy, providing employment for dozens of staff, and its continued operation from the site should be supported by the city. The purpose of the application is to increase the capacity of Road West Transport. It is becoming a bit tight on site with respect to the current building, and essentially we are seeking an extension of that and the relocation of the office space. The current application was first submitted to the city back in July 2021, so it's been with the city for nearly 2 years now. Initial plans proposed demolition of the existing heritage building, an extension to the factory workshop, and the construction of 4 new industrial units. Following a detailed assessment process, a report was actually prepared and presented to Council over 18 months ago, on the 26th of October 2021, recommending that the application be refused due to the proposed demolition of the heritage building. Well, I'm pleased to say that we are retaining the heritage building on advice from the planning consultant and also a heritage architect who engaged the project, Stephen Carrick. We sought a deferral at the time, and a lot of work has gone into the heritage building and I guess trying to refit that and repurpose it for the industrial site. And you can see on your perspective within the council agenda that what we've been able to do is actually convert into a 2-storey space now with a mezzanine. So that all of the office space will be used in the heritage building, and there'll be a partial demolition at the rear of the heritage building, but essentially it'll be refitted and it's going to look very nice in the Beachborough Road South streetscape. There'll be a parking area that separates the heritage building and the industrial buildings at the rear. And we consider it just a significant improvement on the design which was recommended for refusal back in October 2021. In relation to the conditions in contention, with respect to landscaping, the city is requesting 30 trees be planted on site. Whilst it's admirable to ask for landscaping across the city, it's really conflicted with respect to providing landscaping in industrial areas. We've suggested 20 trees be planted at the front and at the rear of the site, and we can't really fit any more really bring landscaping into conflict with the nature of the industrial use. Internal areas of industrial sites are not spaces where significant amounts of landscaping and tree planting should be considered. Canopy cover in industrial sites presents a fire hazard and has the potential to increase the severity of fire if it's caused on the site. The front and rear of the site are the only areas where landscaping should be required, and even on these parts, it should be minimal. When you look at an aerial and industrial sites, there's little to no landscaping, and there's a reason for that. Landscaping should always be at the front of an industrial site to improve its appearance, but certainly not in the centre where it comes into conflict with truck movements and so forth. So we asked that the 20 trees that we suggested is what is proposed, what is conditioned, and not the 30 that the city has conditioned. With respect to the public art contribution, the retained heritage building provides greater value to the streetscape than any public art could be contemplated or introduced into the site. When you look at the objectives of the public art policy, the city's public art policy, all of those objectives are essentially met by the retention of the heritage building. Some of those being that the public art positively contributes to the streetscape, that the public art contributes towards a strong sense of place, promotes the expression of a local character, and so on and so forth. We do all of that through the retention of this heritage building. And if you look at the Heritage Consultant's report, it's very detailed in its, the reasons for its retention and the benefits that it gives to the street and the local area. So with that in mind, I asked the council to support the application and to look at conditions 4 and 7 to see whether condition number 7 can be deleted and condition number 4 can be modified, that we provide 20 trees on site. And thank you very much and appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you for your deputation. I'll just ask if there's any questions from councillors. Deputy Mayor.
Hi, thank you. I just want to check the 20 trees that you're proposing to put in, they're all Angophora cristata?
Sorry, what was that?
They're all Angophora cristata, the smooth bark apple?
Sorry.
Trees?
The trees, are they? Is that a species? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay then.
Sorry.
Sorry, I won't ask the rest of the question, it's all right.
Yeah. Sorry, it wasn't prepared by me, it was someone else.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you, thanks.
So, councillors, we've also received several written deputations for this evening. One written deputation has been submitted by Joe Bauer in relation to item 10.1.1, Keeping and Control of Cats Amendment Local Law 2023. One written deputation has been submitted by Charlotte Dudley in relation to item 10.3.1, Safe Routes to School Implementation Plan. 3 written deputations have been received in relation to item 10.3.3, Local Bike Plan Review, from Kate Bowker, Courtney Babb and Transition Town Bayswater. 4 written deputations have also been submitted by Liz McQueen, Teresa Tholstrup, Alex Ellis and Peter Illich in relation to item 10.4.2, proposed naming of laneway within the street block bordered by Crawford Road, Stewart Street, York Street and Alma Street, Maylands. These have been provided to councillors and are available on the city's website, and I will take those as read. Now move...
It's me, Mayor. Sorry, Kate Barker's requested hers to be read aloud. I noticed in the written deputation.
Yes, I'm not reading any of the written deputations. If everybody requested that, we'd have, 4, 7, we'd have too many, so it won't be, they'll be minuted, they'll be available in the minutes. So I'll move on to item 7, questions on agenda reports. Councillors will now ask if there are any questions on items that were subject to deputations. Councillor Palmer, I believe you've got a question for item 10.3.1, Safe Routes to School Implementation Plan. If you intend to ask that question, I'll have to ask the Deputy Mayor to leave the room.
I have given it in writing, so I'm happy to just receive a report on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillors, any questions on the items that were subject to deputations? Deputy Mayor.
Just in relation to that last item, 10.4.1, in relation to the trees, if I can ask, Alex, you're it. If I can, through the chair, to the relevant officer, just in relation to the species, the Angophora cristata, on how big they grow.
We'll go to the manager. If you could please use the microphone.
we go. Through the chair, I have to take that on notice. It's a non-endemic species, so I'm not entirely sure.
Councillor Peterson-Pick.
I have a few questions about item 10.1.1, the CATS local law.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So my first question is just a clarification to make sure that I understand, because different deputies express the changes that on the table differently. So from my understanding, we currently have a local law in place that was gazetted with clause 2.2, and the proposal is to remove that clause. Is this correct?
I'll go to the Manager of Governance.
Through the chair.
Sorry, Ellie, you'll need to turn off your...
Sorry, through the chair, yes, that is correct. So we have a local law in place that was adopted by council last year, and we're currently consulting or have just finished consultation on an amendment that would remove that clause. But the clause currently is in the local law, but we've given an undertaking to the Joint Standing Committee of Delegated Legislation that we will not enforce it.
And just on that one, and the current local law has already been gazetted, right? The one in place.
Yes, the local law that was adopted by the council last August has been gazetted and is currently in place.
Thank you. With regards to the discretion issue that the report is saying, and it was mentioned by the deputy, the first one, that the officers are saying that council does not have any discretion on this issue. Can we just get some clarification? What does it mean, no discretion at all?
Through the chair, I believe that the officer comment in relation to not having discretion had more to do with the fact that we gave an undertaking to the Joint Standing Committee that we would amend the local law in December last year, and we said that we would do that within 6 months. So we made that undertaking on the 6th of December, which means that by the 6th of June, we need to have dealt with the matter, which would be to amend the local law. So because we're now at the council meeting that is just before the 6th of June, this is the time that the council needs to make a decision on the matter. So I think that the comment about not having discretion had to do with the fact that we're now up against that time frame.
And does council has discretion?
Through the chair, that's a difficult question for me to answer. We're not sure what the consequences of not meeting that deadline or that undertaking would be, and that would be something that we would need to seek legal advice on.
Are we going to seek legal advice on, so we know the implications? I'm interested to know what I would like to know, and my question is, what can happen in situations where a local government who already committed to take undertaking decides to change their mind? What can they do to us? Can they disband the local government, send people to jail? What are the implications that we are talking about?
Through the chair, so the city has sought some legal advice on what the consequences might be if we were not to meet the undertaking that we've made to the JSCDL. We've also sought some legal advice on what the process would need to be if we did want to, I guess, take another route.
Thank you. So on that legal advice, and then we also received advice today that there will be legal advice about the whole clause 2.2 as well. So will that legal advice be shared publicly before the debate?
Through the chair, normally legal advice would be provided to the council in confidence. Perhaps the CEO may be a better placed to respond.
Yeah. Through the chair, councillors, the legal advice that we will seek will be legal advice for you as a council to inform you to make the decision next week at Tuesday's ordinary council meeting. It's not legal advice that we will be sharing with the public. It will be legal advice for you as a council to inform you in your decision-making process next week. And that legal advice you should have by the end of the week.
And the last question, would we be able to refer to that legal advice in any way?
My recommendation, Councillor, if you refer to that legal advice during the public debate next week that is open, then you would want to go behind closed doors to keep that privilege, because if you are making a decision based on that legal advice to take a different route than what the Joint Standing Committee has recommended that you've already undertaken to do, then I would be strongly recommending you do that behind closed doors under confidential discussion.
Any other questions, councillors? On any of the items that were subject to deputation? No? Okay, we'll now move. So for those in the public gallery, we'll now be asking if there are questions on the remaining items on the agenda, and you can leave if you wish, but you're also welcome to stay. So, councillors, I've received notification from Councillor Peterson-Pick that he would like to ask a question about item 11.1. And that was the only one. Councillor Clark, I can see your hand is up.
Yes, Mayor, I just had a couple of questions. Apologies that I didn't get a chance to email about them earlier, but just in relation to the financial reports in 10.2.1.
Okay, we'll start with that then, if that's okay, because that's ahead in the agenda. So please go ahead and ask the question.
So on page, I believe it's page 45 of the public electronic agenda, I'm just trying to switch to it. Sorry, this is why I tend to work off hard copy. There's reference to employee costs being, I think, essentially $1 million underspent, and that being that variance there. I just wanted to get a sense of, I suppose, from the staff. I suppose, yeah. I mean, the explanation is about shortages, but I just wanted to get a further explanation around how we're managing that and the financial implications of that.
I'll go to the CEO.
Yeah, through the chair. The response to that, Councillor Clark, is that it's been a very tough couple of years in terms of recruitment of staff. And there has been a lot of turnover. I think coming out the back of COVID, there's been a lot of staff movements as well within the sector as a whole, not just the City of Bayswater. So we are experiencing some turnover and vacancy rates, and that $1 million is a reflection of that within the financial position. Going forward, I hope that the labour market is not as buoyant as what it is and we don't see as many movements. But can't guarantee that in the short term. There is a lot of movements within the sector. And I think it's not only the local government sector, I think there's a number of sectors that are experiencing this as well.
Thank you. I believe it's on 46, but I now just can't find it. There's reference in the papers around essentially construction and supply constraints, and we're about $4.5 million, I suppose, underspent on that. So I just wanted to get some more detail around that.
Just page 47, I believe, Councillor.
Yes, 47, thank you.
I'll go to the CEO, or I'll go to the Director of Infrastructure.
Through the chair, yeah, that relates to the capital works program. So there's a number of items there that are underspent. I probably need to take that on notice and provide more information in terms of which projects that relates to. Yeah, I can provide that before the next meeting.
No worries, thank you. My final question on this item, I think, was page 50. There's a 27% variance on the net current assets, and then essentially an underspend of about 5.4 million. I just want to check, is that sort of essentially made up of construction and employee costs, or are we looking at other issues as well in terms of big picture?
Page 50.
Yep, page 50. I believe it's the variance, the total variance. Is that correct, Councillor Clark?
Yes, at the bottom there, it's a 27% variance.
Yep.
Of about $5.4 million.
So I'll go to the Director of Finance or Corporate.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is the statement of comprehensive income, and so it's showing you different it's summarising variances in revenue being received, and which is over budget and under expenditure compared to budget. And when you go through and total that, that's where you're getting that variance in the closing position.
Thank you, that helps.
Any other questions, Councillor Clark?
Not on that item, thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions on this item, councillors? No? We'll now move to... Councillor Clark, did you say you have other items you'd like to ask a question on?
I was just going to double check, but perhaps we go to Councillor Peterson-Picks first. I'm just going back through my notes.
Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Peterson-Pick. It was item 11.1. If you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Just several questions. My first one is quite a general one. With regards to FOGO, I remember that there was stage 2 as part of this project that will apply FOGO to significant strata complexes. Has that already been implemented?
I'll go to the director.
Yeah, through the chair, I believe it's happening as we speak. Most of that's been processed. I think they're still working with a number of complexes in terms of coming out with the best solution for those particular places.
Some complexes already have FOGO?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. With regards to the bins, I understand that in accordance with that decision from November 2020, we will need to replace the red lid bins. My question is, because it mentions that we will need to purchase those bins, we need to purchase new bins. So why can't Cleanaway, we can swap the bins to, you know, the big bins to the small bins? Why can't that option is not relevant with Cleanaway to just swap them instead of purchasing new bins?
I'll go to the director.
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, all 3 bins are owned by Cleanaway. The proposal would be that if we downsize the bins, we'd be buying new bins and delivering those, and we won't be taking the red-lidded bins back, so we won't be purchasing those off Cleanaway. But we will be providing further information in the report that will come back to council if council adopts this recommendation.
So my question is a general question with no relevance to this necessarily this motion. If it's adopted or not adopted, I think the question is still there. Can't Cleanaway swap the big bins with the smaller bins? Was that option looked at by the city, which can save us the money to purchase new bins? We just swap. We tell them, take your big bin, give us a smaller bin.
Through the chair, I suppose if we're going to do any sort of transaction with Cleanaway, there'll be a cost associated with that. So that's something that we'd have to talk to them and see what the contract actually allows us to do.
Okay. So was that not looked into before?
Through the chair, at this stage, we haven't looked at all the options in terms of the bins.
Okay, so just to clarify that, because I think it's important, because it quotes $1.8 million of purchasing bins. So in the report, it says this is a fact. So I'm trying to understand. So it's not certain yet. So you're saying that now that the city might look into looking at the swapping thing? Because the report says something else. It says that we will need to purchase and it will cost us that. So my question is this a fact or there are other options?
Through the chair, if we, what the report states is $1.8 million to purchase the smaller bins and to have them delivered to the sites. If that occurs, we wouldn't be buying the red-leaded bins, the existing 240 ones. We wouldn't be buying them off Cleanaway, but we'd have to buy the other bins, the recyclable bin and the FOGO bin from Cleanaway if we choose to buy them at some time in the future.
Okay, thank you. Another question, please. Has any work done by the city to identify which families meet any of those 4 exemptions that the report talks about? On page 139, for example, families with large general waste bin that require, bigger waste. Do we already know how many families meet them? Have we already consulted those families?
Through the chair, we don't have that information at this stage. It's a fairly big process where we need to engage with the community. That will be a whole project in itself.
So the community is not aware of this?
Through the chair, not at this stage.
Okay, so just follow up a question. Sorry, Madam Mayor. So this decision was from November 2020. So is the director saying that nothing has occurred since then?
Through the chair, can you clarify in terms of what that question is? Because, I mean, we have rolled out FOGO, but in terms of the bin sizes, we haven't done anything in relation to engaging with the community.
Thank you. On page 140 in the middle, the officers are saying that if this motion is supported, then the further report to council will include an assessment of each of the valuation options proposed, which is the 4 exemptions that I referred to. So my question is, if the motion is not supported, would council still get information about those 4 exemptions and who meets the criteria? Because I would expect that information to be given no matter what the motion does.
Through the chair, I suppose probably what would have to happen is that we'll probably have to bring something back to council some stage, because if we're going to proceed with reducing the bin sizes, then there'll be a number of matters that we need to work through to determine, you know, whether we're still going to allow some larger bins. If we do, what the costs will be attached to that in terms of fees and any other matters that need to be considered through that process.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this item? No? Okay, Councillor Clark, did you find the item?
Sorry, Mayor, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from councillors? I have a question in relation to item 14.1.1, but that's in the confidential, so it'd have to go behind closed doors. So I'll just go out one more before we move to go behind closed doors. Are there any other questions on any other items on the agenda? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I don't have the item number. It's the one on renaming the lane.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
That was under the deputations.
Yep, my apologies. Also have previously made a declaration on this, an impartiality declaration, which I neglected to do this time. My in-laws own a property on the other side, in the City of Stirling side of what would be that lane if it continued.
So impartial interest.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so this is in relation to item 10.4.2, proposed naming of laneway within the street block bordered by Crawford Road, Stewart Street, York Street and Alma Street, Maylands.
Thank you for
Go ahead,
reading
ask your
out the
questions.
title for me. So my question really is, like, what is the urgency, and why don't we have other names, I think, broadly, that came out of the public feedback from the community?
I'll go to the director.
Through the chair, there's no urgency. There has been a formal request, though, to name this right away or the street a laneway, basically to provide a bit more direction to emergency vehicles. But it doesn't seem to appear to be a significant issue. It's just a request, so that's why we progressed the request. In terms of the names, that was the names that's been a hangover for some number of years, and that's why the recommendation is to try to fill that pot with more names and go through the process, because there's a process they have to go through to put names onto that list. So that's why the officer's recommendation, part 2, is to go through that process to put more names in that list. So my understanding is no urgency other than in response to a request where the resident did have concerns that the emergency vehicles could not find the place, their house, easily.
Thank you. I mean, that does sound pretty urgent. But how long does it take to come up with a list of new names? Can we just invent a name? Can we just, call it the disabled lane, like next week?
You could. I probably won't get through. But the it's got to go through a process, because it does create expectation that if there's a name that's on the list, it will be used. We're not just the determining authority, it is Landgate, so we've got to make sure we meet their criteria in terms of what names is allowed. We only make recommendations to them, they make the ultimate decision. So in terms of time frames, we can make names, but it's got to meet the criteria. in order to get that support from Landgate ultimately.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to have another question, if I might, please, Mayor. So in terms of the process then, so we come up with a name from a pre-approved list, and then it still goes back to them for approval?
That's correct. There's still a formal process that's go through. So basically, Landgate gives their support on names. So at least it gives a bit of confidence that that list could be considered, rather than a name that hasn't been considered by Landgate, and you're pretty much wasting Landgate's time ultimately, and our time if it's not going to get supported by Landgate. So basically, it's just saying this is a suite of names, but ultimately still has to be officially approved by Landgate.
Nothing further at the moment.
Any other questions on this item? I have a question just to the director. So, is there any, for instance, if we were to defer consideration of this, is there something, a temporary measure that could be put in place which would assist emergency vehicles in locating those houses in that area? Because that seems to be the driver for the request coming through. Is there anything you can think of?
Through the chair, through yourself, we can look at that, because it's not uncommon to have names for all laneways. So we can probably investigate that and get back to councillors before next week's council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I suppose just a quick one. On the pre-approved list, are there any women's names?
Through the chair, no. I think there's only 2 names remaining, and it's the 2 names that was subject to advertising.
So we've used all the other ones?
So
Have we used all the other ones?
That's correct, over the years, yes.
So following on from that, then when would another list be sent to Landgate so that we have another pre-approved list?
Yeah, that's the purpose of part 2 of the officer's recommendation, is to go through a process of consulting, and that was some of the feedback we got from the communities, that we haven't consulted with the community on names. So the intention was to consult with the community, get a name list, given some context on where it could be supported in terms of the criteria requirements. And then we'll go to council, and then we'll go to Landgate ultimately to get their support.
So would that consultation, through the chair, would that consultation then also go through our reconciliation action group as well as the inclusion and diversity group?
We could, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? No. Any other questions on any other items? Because I won't be asking a question on the confidential one anymore because I forgot the question. So if there's no other questions, I will now close the agenda briefing forum at 8:13 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CEO.
Thank you.